Hello, Liz. How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, it's so lovely to be here. I am doing well. I have my iced coffee with me, so it has been a good morning thus far.
I love that. I'm so jealous of your iced coffee. You're in Georgia.
I am, yeah. I'm like inside Atlanta.
Okay, so I went to Georgia State. I am
Oh,
from Georgia.
okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in Decatur.
Okay, yeah, I love Decatur. One of my best friends lives in Decatur. Well, he's like
Oh,
East Atlanta, Decatur, like right
yeah, yeah,
near
yeah.
the border.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he is there, and I'm from McDonough, if you know where that is. I don't
I
know if you know.
do. My in-laws live there.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Get out of here. Nobody ever knows where that is unless they're
I
from
was
like.
literally there last weekend. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I want to make a joke and say I'm sorry that you were there, but McDonough is a lovely town and full of lovely people.
Yeah.
So I'll keep that to myself. But it is my hometown, so I want to remind people that I can say that.
That's true. That's true.
hmm
You can.
So I'm super super excited to talk to you because we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is religious trauma.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is talked about, but I feel like it's not talked about quite enough.
Yeah.
So I want to first ask you about you a little bit
Yeah.
and who your clientele are. You said you're in Decatur.
Yep.
Are you doing in person, virtual? What does a day look like for you?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm coming to you live from my office, in Decatur. So right now I am an associately licensed social worker in Georgia, and then I also have a telehealth license for Florida. I've applied for my clinical license, so whenever the board gods want to grant me permission to take my exam, that would be lovely. Who's
hmm
to say when that will happen? And so, yeah, I own my own practice. And I'm a queer identified therapist, and I'm primarily working with queer and trans folks navigating religious trauma, complex trauma, and then also folks who are interested and or actively exploring like ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, things like that. And so, yeah, most of the time, I would say, despite having an in person office, 60 to 70% of my clients opt to do virtual. And so I like having an office because I painted it like purple and it's really fun and gay, which is really great.
hmm
And then two, I do have some clients who are love in person, and so and I love getting to offer that. So yeah, it's a typical day for me is, I see somewhere between like 5 and 8 clients 4 to 5 days out of the week. That sounds like I see like 40 clients a week. I do not. I see like 25 to 28 clients a week.
hmm I've noticed too about virtual is that I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people want in person until they have to commute, and then they're like,
Yes.
I want virtual.
Yes. Or
hmm
it's like, oh, I'm seeing you in the middle of my work day and this work meeting ran long and now I don't want to be stressed leading up to therapy. And so like that is something that I appreciate. As I was not a therapist pre-pandemic. I started grad school in 2020 in the height of the pandemic. But I do think that is something that came out of the pandemic is just an increase in people offering virtual services and increasing accessibility in that way. And I'm pretty flexible about that. My clients will last minute text me like 5 minutes before the session being like, let's do virtual, which is I'm totally fine with.
hmm I remember in my internship, I did in my mental health counseling internship, people would do that at the last minute, and they're like, I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "No, no, no, yeah, don't worry
Yeah.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah."
is totally fine.
hmm I'm like, "It is totally fine." I'm so excited. So religious trauma,
Yeah.
that's a word.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
I I know her.
Yeah.
I've met her.
Yep.
Um, you also working with queer people. Like I'm
Yep.
super excited to like talk to you
Yep.
about particularly like the correlation between that and then what that looks like and all that stuff. So I want to ask you just first in general, how do you define religious trauma? What does religious trauma mean to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think about religious trauma, I think about two things. So, I think about adverse religious experiences, meaning like the actual thing that happened, like the harm that happened, whether that's like you know, coercive experiences with a pastor, spiritual leader, any sort of like the harm that could have happened. And then I think about, right, kind of the definition of trauma, which is trauma is our body's response to things, right? Trauma is not what happened to you, but how your body responded to it. And so you kind of have to combine, right, the like adverse religious experiences, whether that's psychological, emotional, physical, spiritual, right? Lots of coercion, lots of abuse, lots of fear, right? I think, that ties into the kind of high control environments. Um, and then your body's response to being in that environment, to being in that situation, right? And oftentimes with religious trauma, it is happening over and over and over again because it is about the environment that you are in, as opposed to, like a one-time trauma, like a really bad car wreck, right? Where it's a one-time thing, it hasn't happened again, as opposed to if you're at church 3 to 4 times a week, right? If church is your whole life, like you're in that environment all the time, you're potentially getting exposed and experiencing an adverse religious experience over and over again.
Mhm. Does that mean it moves from like regular like PTSD to like more complex
Yeah.
PTSD?
Yeah. Yeah. So most folks that I'm working with, and that's not to say that there aren't kind of single incident trauma within religious trauma. There absolutely can be. But for the folks that I am working with, and like with my own experiences with the religious trauma, the impact of it, even though, the DSM is a little wonky about CPTSD, right? But the impact of it, I think, fits much more into a CPTSD category than it does a PTSD, because it is also so long term. Recovery looks like a plethora of different things. And also, I'm in the Bible Belt, right? And so there's a church on every fucking corner here. There's religious signs everywhere, right? Like there are
Mhm.
so many opportunities for activation and to experience the triggering things over and over again because of the environment that we're in.
What is that? That brings up like a really good point. If you have somebody who has experienced like intense levels of religious trauma, which I
Yeah.
want to talk to you a little bit about, like what that might look like.
Yeah.
Just like you said, being somewhere where there's a church on every corner, or in the Bible Belt, which I am from as well.
Yeah.
But what does that look like for someone who is existing in an environment where they see like representations of religion everywhere they go all the time, and people are consistently talking about it all the time?
Hmm. I mean, it depends, right? Because it depends on whether the folks that I am working with, some of them fit into the religious deconstruction, religious trauma recovery, and religious deconversion. So they are no longer interested in maintaining a relationship with any sort of faith entity, at least what it looked like that they were part of. They have kind of are in the process of deconverting or have fully deconverted. And then I have some folks who it feels important for them to maintain a relationship with faith, and so they are and even it feels important for them to maintain a relationship with aspects of the religion that they were brought up in, right? And so those things are going to be a little bit different, right? Because the person who is wanting to maintain a relationship with faith, they're probably going to be in more church environments, right? And so
Mhm.
part of it is, doing a lot of I call myself a resource girly. I am a huge like resource and community person. And so with either kind of client in this scenario, we cannot change the fact that you are environmentally in the South. Like I cannot remove churches from street corners, and nor do I think that is my job in life. And we can find avenues for you to build community, whether it's virtual, whether it's queer community in Atlanta, whether it's, maintaining a sense of kind of that religious community, but without kind of spiritual power, right? Like there are a lot of different ways that, for me at least, that I think I focus with clients on some of the internal resourcing and then also external resourcing. And also to be in environments where people are talking about religious trauma so they don't just feel like, oh, cool, everyone's religious and they're cool with this. And I'm just like kind of the odd one out here. So yeah, it's a lot of internal and external
Hmm.
resourcing, because I think internal resourcing can only get you so far. When you've experienced communal harm, you also need communal healing.
Hmm. I am really curious about your ideas behind deconstruction, but
Yep.
I also want to just get your gauge on when someone says religious trauma. Like
Yeah.
what are the kind of experiences that we're talking about? I mean, maybe not something. I feel like there's some obvious stuff, right? It's like, oh, I was in church and I was like essayed by like a
Yeah.
pastor. That
Yeah.
I hate to use the word obvious, but that I feel like that's more
Yeah.
like people have a clear understanding of, okay, that was a traumatic experience.
Yep.
What are some of the experiences that people are coming and talking to you about that are you're like, okay, there might be something here
Mhm.
when it comes to like influencing how you reframed like a lot of things around this. What does that look like for a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, any sort of abuse is one of the things that is most frequently like talked about, as well as like conversion therapy, right? Which to me falls into the category of abuse, right? Um, and so those I agree with you, kind of for lack of a better word, kind of more obvious examples of like harm. I also think something that is I don't think is talked about enough is public shaming that can happen in religious environments, and how that can be incredibly destabilizing, right? Like public shaming in terms of not necessarily like you're brought in front of the church, although that sometimes does happen, but even public shaming in like a small group setting, right? Like you tell a small group leader or you tell a friend about a sin or something that happened, right? And now they're like, well, I feel compelled by God to bring this up in this group,
Hmm.
right? And so you're being, in a lot of ways, publicly outed, and then potentially othered, right? Another thing is sermons, right? Like the literal teachings of the church of what a pastor or spiritual leader is saying every week. What are they saying about someone who not even someone who's like queer or trans, right? What are they saying about someone who's divorced? What are they saying about someone who got pregnant outside of marriage, right? Like, what are things that people are, because I feel like churches famously don't like folks who hold marginalized identities. Some churches do, some churches are great, right? But I feel like the conservative evangelical church is not fantastic about folks who hold marginalized identities, but it goes beyond that, right? People who are divorced, people who have gotten pregnant out of marriage, right? Like also the ways that they're being talked about, the shame that is being used over and over and
Hmm.
over again, the othering that's being used, right? Like I was in church environments where they were like, yeah, we welcome everyone. Um, but then if they found out that you were queer, you could volunteer at the church as long as it was in a hidden role,
Hmm.
right? And so that is a very kind of, I think it can be more of a covert way of othering, of saying you are bad, you are wrong. And also, we are providing you with a consequence for your identity and for who you are. Your identity is worth a consequence, right? Like that has a lasting impact on a person.
Hmm. I'm going to bring some of myself into this session here.
Yeah,
So it's interesting you mentioned sermons specifically because my grandfather is a Southern Baptist pastor. And
same.
really?
Yes.
Oh my God. So mine's in Loganville. I don't know where yours is.
I mean he's old now, so he's retired, but he was in I mean he was all over, but his last one was in Bostwick.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Bostwick.
It's kind of close to Loganville.
Okay. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Loganville, they're originally from Lenore City, Tennessee. So they're from like way out there. One of the things that were really, I don't want to say defining for me as a person, but defining in my sexuality. I'm going to come out to you. I'm gay.
Oh my
Um,
god.
I know. Just get off the call. Um, I remember being a little gay kid, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe like 10, 11, 12. And some of those first kind of queer feelings that come up with like, wait a minute, I'm hearing what everybody else is attracted to and wants to do, and I'm feeling a little differently from that. So there's these like, before I came across the epiphany of like, oh, I like I'm attracted to like men. There were all these other feelings that kind of predated that, I think,
Yeah.
for me. And yeah, I remember hearing the sermons being like 11 or something like that. I remember specifically the sermon about homosexuality. And I remember the language of it is a choice and people are choosing. Like, I remember just what was being taught to this group of
Yeah.
people, and you hear what's being taught, and you hear the amens in the audience, and you hear that that's right, preacher. Like, you hear all that stuff in the audience. And I remember being like, like 10, 11, whatever, thinking like, I don't know about that. I don't know if
Yeah.
he's like, I don't know exactly what it was, but I could feel like the brewing of of me like not agreeing with what he was saying.
Yep.
And this is somebody that, like, in religious contexts, right? Like, they're put up on literally a pedestal,
Yep.
and they're like this ultimate figure of authority.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're like a little kid and you're hearing stuff like that, that's something that you're going to remember if you're a little queer kid.
Yep.
I don't know if whatever straight kids remember stuff like that, but yeah, I mean, I definitely remember that. So that's kind of like something that's imprinted onto me. And when you said sermons, like hearing specific sermons, that's what was coming up for me, is thinking, okay, yeah, this is something's off here. I don't know
Yep.
exactly what it is yet. I don't think, because there's a lot of people I think that are like maybe in 15, 16, 14, and they're more acutely aware of their what the church calls like same-sex attraction.
Yes.
And and so, maybe that impacted them differently. I remember it a little bit before then. I don't know. Is
Yeah.
that something that you hear a lot with clients about those kind of sermons and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think it depends, right? Because one of the things, um I'm saying this in a positive way, and I think it can be positive in some ways, but there's some nuance. I think it's harmful in a lot of ways, is that one of the benefits of religion, right, is that it tells you who you are. Here's your identity, here's your gender, here's your sexuality, here's your role, here are your values, here are your beliefs, here's your routine, right? It has a beautiful, like, beautiful, I'm putting that in air quotes for anyone listening and not watching my face, life laid out for you, right? And so something that I think is particularly common is that, yeah, I think there are a lot of folks that I've worked with that were like, they were the little gay kid in church going, I don't know what's going on here. I don't, this feels bad. I don't, but also, depending on age, like, don't have language to articulate that. Don't
Mm,
know, kind of what to say or how to explore it or what resources or who to talk to, right? And then I think there are a lot of folks who, honestly, this is the category that I fit into, were like, well, being gay is not wrong. Like, that's not bad, but like, that's not me, because everyone finds women attractive, right?
mhm,
And so much more in the category of like, I just, maybe I like men and women, but that's like kind of everyone, right? Like, whatever. Because I was like, I cannot operate outside of this box. This box is my safety. This is how I have community. This is how I have access to resources. This is how I make sure I do not burn in hell, right?
mhm,
Which is that is one that is, I should have mentioned earlier, burning in hell, and the idea that you are born sinful and you will die sinful and you just hope to God that you don't go to hell is such an intense one. And so then a lot of the folks that I'm working with, it's kind of a split mix between, yeah, folks who knew that they were queer and knew, okay, this is probably not going to go well for me here. I need to keep this under wraps, right? And then
mhm,
folks who were like, I was so in the box that it wasn't until I had a little bit of breathing room that I was like, wait, maybe I also don't want to be in this box. And maybe also I do experience attraction to a ton of other types of people. And this is a way that I am finally able to experience a little bit of internal safety in order to explore that about myself.
mhm. What is so with that information, what does deconstruction look like? Because it's interesting. I think the thing that's frustrating for some non-religious people
Yeah.
or people that are outside of the religious
Yeah.
sphere or people that have come from it is this kind of like, and I don't want to offend people that are religious, but there's this kind of this circular reasoning. It's kind of like, well, the Bible said so.
Yeah.
And when you bring up new information or present with new information, it's like, yeah, but the Bible said so. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're not going to get anywhere here. So what does it look like to pull somebody out of that loop?
Yeah. I think it depends on how in the loop they are, right? Because I work with folks who were just kind of your average, like, twice a week churchgoers, once a week churchgoers and experience religious trauma. And then I work with folks who grew up in pretty high control religion, are from a pastor's family, or their family kind of operated almost like a family cult. Like it was very insular. It was the paternal figure was the pastor, kind of. They did home church, right? Like we're getting into cultish territory, right? And so one of the first things that I ask people is, what do you like about it? What do you like about religion? What do you like about being in that space? What does it give you, right? Because I think a lot of times my clients expect me to hate religion, and I'm like, no, religion's not my favorite thing in the world, but also I don't hate it, and I'm not bringing that into the space. I really loved part of my time in religion. I really loved being in community. I really loved feeling like I had this really beautiful values-led life. I have it way more now, right? And so a lot of times it's talking about, what do you like about religion? What do you not like about it? If you were a different person, using a lot of parts work language, which I think can be really helpful because it allows us to hold kind of multiple parts, multiple truths, multiple feelings all at one time. And talk about, okay, how, are there other ways that you have seen people do this? Do you know folks? I personally really knew very little people who were not religious until after college. And I was absolutely baffled when I would meet them and go, you didn't grow up religious? How are you? You can be a good person and not religious? That's wild, right? Like I had no idea. Um, and so yeah, it's honestly, a lot of it at first is talking about the positives of religion. It's talking about what people get out of it, right? And then going, what if you could get that in other environments? I also really like reclamation collectives model of like reclaiming. I use that a lot with clients of like, you kind of start the deconstruction process of it's often very conversational. It's talking about, what do you like, what do you don't like, right? And then it kind of moves into, how do you want to reclaim parts of yourself? How do you, or maybe claim for the first time, right? Because that is something that religion does, is it kind of takes away your bodily autonomy in a lot of ways. It takes away parts of who you are. And then how can we kind of like try that on, right? My easiest example of this is when clients stop going to church, they're like, what the fuck do I do with my Sunday morning now? And I'm like, okay, well, what did you like about Sunday morning? And oftentimes it's the ritual, it's the routine, it's the community, right? And it's like, what if you got a group of friends together and went on a hike? Because that is where you feel most connected to yourself. What if y'all co-create a Sunday routine for y'all?
Brunch.
Brunch. Go to drag brunch, right? Like go do whatever, right? Do it for 1 week. Try it once. And let's see how it goes. And let's check in and see how it feels. Okay, it felt good. Let's try it again, right? And it's really this kind of slow process of, we're taking it one step at a time. We're putting one foot in front of the other. We are not trying to speed roll this process. And also because I think deconstruction is across your entire life.
So I'm not going to out my best friend, but my best friend was really, really involved in the church for a long time.
Okay.
And she's out of it now. Like
Okay.
she kind of had that experience, and where she kind of deconstructed and came out of it. And not just her, but a lot of people that I know that were really, really involved. And they had this kind of who they are now versus who they were then. And a lot of them that I talk to are kind of like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I like was in this for so long. They just feel this sense of when they've stepped out of it, they're like, whoa. What does it look like for you from the therapist perspective? Like when you have someone coming in and they're in this thing, or maybe, they're tiptoeing out of it or something, versus after they've like kind of deconstructed and they've moved out of this and they've kind of established their own values and what is good to them and what is ethical to them. How are those two people different?
Yeah. I think so often it's, you have so many aspects of the core that is the same, right? The core values of community, the core values of having morals, the core values of sometimes social justice, right? Because churches love to do, I think it's oftentimes white saviorism, but they paint it as like being involved in community, helping out, right? Like things like that. I think so often some of those values remain the same, right? It's just the way that someone is living those values out and the way that someone is able to care for themselves and feel safer in their bodies, it feel like they can critically think and ask questions without feeling like they're going to get publicly shamed for questioning God, right? I
Hmm.
think there can be such a stronger sense of self and flexibility and you shifting and changing and being more expansive than when you were just trying to make yourself as small as possible to fit in this box that was decided for you. And you get to say, wait, what does safety mean to me? What does it mean
Hmm.
to feel safe in my body? Who do I want to be?
Hmm.
And I think that can be really powerful. And I don't think that deconstruction means that you are getting rid of your full self and like reconstructing a whole new self, right? I think there's so many core pieces that get to stay the same. It's just the ways in which um they're lived out are different.
Hmm. When going back to queer people,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the long-term effects of having your identity labeled as sinful? So one of the things I see this because this is what happens. So I'm on TikTok. I see a lot of this stuff on TikTok, right? And I see it because I watch it.
Yeah.
And that's why they keep showing it to me.
Yes.
And I'm like, why am I getting like street preachers on TikTok? And it's
No,
like, well,
literally.
Dustin, you're watching it and you're looking at the comments.
Yeah.
And so, um, what does it look like? Oh my God, what was I even talking about? Yeah, so a lot of these things are, this is sinful, right? Like the way that you're living is blah blah blah. One of the things that I see with some creators that are the more controversial creators that are kind of people that were like formerly queer, right? They're like, I'm gay and I identify as gay, but I recognize that that is sinful, so I'm going to choose this kind of like self-celibacy route. Um,
Uh-huh.
because it's a sin, or people that
Yeah.
say, I if your church is affirming sin, like it's not a good church. Just this whole concept of sin and
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
What does that look like if somebody were, coming from the perspective of like, no, this is a sin and your identity is a sin, how could you explain to them how it has impacted the people that when they come in and their whole lives they've been identified as sinful? Like how would you explain to them that like what how the impact of what they're saying? There it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge question, right? Because I think so much of it's hard to me, it feels really hard to categorize the magnitude of the impact of that because, right, like, I mean, I feel like on this personal beliefs, and I don't want to speak for you, Justin, but like, I don't believe that being queer is a choice, right? I feel like this
Hmm.
is a piece of you discovering who you are as a person. And so then, um, this idea, and I think this is where conservative evangelicalism can be really good at parsing out language, right? Like same sex attraction versus being queer versus
Hmm.
like homosexual tendency, right? Like they can get real specific with the language that they're using in order to not kind of cross some lines. Um, the idea, and this is so much of what I talk about with clients, is that they're like, I was told my entire life that being gay is a sin. I was told, and I knew that I was gay, right? Or I discovered that about myself. And I am just sitting in church and looking at all these people who love me. And immediately, if they knew who I would choose as a partner, or they knew this part of me, right? They would shun me away and I would lose access to community. I would lose access to resources and I would potentially have to lose my relationship with God, right? Because I'm being told, oh, you're made in the image of God, but then also being gay is a sin and like being gay is a choice. And it doesn't feel like a choice for me, right? And so I'm not made in the image of God. I'm just like destined for hell if I come out as gay. Like what then, right? And that contributes significantly, like when we take a systemic perspective, right? uh, I worked a lot in youth homelessness, right? A lot of young adults were homeless because they came out and their religious parents were like, no, get away, right?
Mhm.
Until you sort this out, you cannot come home. It contributes to significant rates of suicide, self harm, drug use. Like there's the impact and the pain that is caused with such significant othering for something that cannot be changed. I I mean, I feel like we could talk for hours about the
Mhm.
impact of that, right? Because it is, and it feels very the juxtaposition of we love everyone, we want to welcome everyone, we follow Jesus's teachings, and hate the sin, love the sinner, but also
Mhm.
I'm not going to support you. I'm not going to come to your wedding. I'm not going to come to your dinner party. I'm not going to actually support you until you fit into the box that I believe you have to fit into in order for me to love you.
Mhm. And it's so tough because there's this divine thing backing it, right? It's like, despite what like the individual parent may feel of like, okay, well, I want to go to there's this like divine like authority figure that's like, no, 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 no. This is like
Mhm.
under no circumstance can you engage in this. And so
Yep.
it's like, yeah, I mean, so I that was an extreme example. I recognize that. But
Yeah.
I am curious about when you have like little queer kids that are coming to you, not little queer kids, but a big queer kid adults that were
Yeah.
once little queer kids.
Yeah.
And they're kind of describing to you some of the things that they heard, some of the things that they
Hmm.
experienced. What does it mean for you to create a safe space for them? Like how does a safe space get made
Yeah.
in a session we're talking about something that is so divine, right? It's like this thing is in everything. So how what does safety look like?
So I operate less with trying to make it safe and more like I'm trying to make it brave. Because ultimately, as human beings, we're gonna cause harm to each other, right? Like that's gonna happen, intentionally, unintentionally, right? And my goal is, yeah, I want my clients to feel safe. Like I don't want anyone listening to this podcast to be like, oh, Liz doesn't want clients to feel safe. But what I really want is to create a place where my clients feel like they can be brave. They can name the thing that feels really scary. They can talk about something if they want to talk about it, right? That was really destabilizing. And also knowing that I'm going to meet them with affirming language, right? This is something, again, another place where I think parts work can be really wonderful, right? Like with my trans clients who grew up in religion and it was really harmful for them. The language that we're using about a younger version of themselves is affirming language, right? I have coloring books in here. We can do a lot of like inner child work, right? And I think, one of the things that I rely so much on as a relational therapist is the attunement is like, let's slow down. Let's check in about this. Is this feeling okay for us to talk about? Do we want to pivot to talking about your dog instead, right? Do we want to pivot to, can I get you some ice? Would that be helpful? Do you want some sour candy, right? Like, I have a lot of kind of tools that are accessible that if things escalate, if we're getting closer to being outside the window of tolerance, that we have some ways to kind of ground into that. And my clients know from the get go, I am on your timeline here. We're not, we have time. We don't have to talk about this at any point if you don't want to. I think the other thing is I make it pretty clear on my social media and on my website that like I've experienced harmful religious experiences myself, and so I do think that that level of self-disclosure is actually really helpful for my clients because they're not sitting there going, is Liz going to know what the flower metaphor means in purity culture and like how that probably like fucked up my perception of my body, right? It's like, no, 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 I got you. I actually do know what that, I do know that what that means. You're not having to do the emotional labor of explaining that. And so there is a little bit of common language there that I do think helps kind of bridge the gap of safety and bravery. Um, but yeah, a lot of times it's asking like, I'm so curious what it would have been like for a younger version of you to see a queer adult be happy. I'm so curious what it would have been
Mhm.
like to be in a group where you knew that there were other queer kids, to get to explore your identity presentation, to get to wear the dress, to get to like paint your room pink, right? Like, what would that have been like for you?
I want to pop because I have two more questions. This one
Yeah.
I want to pop on because you inspired it. So you mentioned these inner children working with a lot with inner
Yeah.
child work with for queer people. What do these? What are you finding that a lot of these inner children want to say in sessions?
Hmm.
The inner children of queer people.
Yeah. I think so often, and I think this is also part of like my inner like queer kid coming out too, and this like as we're talking, right? But so much of what they want to say is like, I wasn't bad. I just wanted to be loved for who I am, right? I wanted to have a safe adult that I could talk about this with. I wanted someone who asked me questions and didn't make assumptions, right? I wanted to be able to wear whatever the fuck I wanted to wear. I wanted to be able to decide and explore who I am as opposed to be given that information.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to ask you. This is my typical rounding question.
Okay.
I know you. So I'm really, really curious in some people's advice. Like I love to hear the best advice that people got. See, people are like, "Oh, this person said this to me this one time,
Yes.
and it just changed." Blah 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 blah. Blah.
Yes.
So I'm curious about: is there any piece of advice for you, or something that you've heard, or a quote, or whatever, that you were like, "Oh wow, that's gonna stick with me for a minute."
Yes. My first therapist that I saw when I was 16 after I had experienced immense grief and was having a really hard time. And I worked with her for like 7 years. She was such a godsend, truly. Um, I was like maybe 2 years post my parent died when I was 16. And so I'm like navigating this massive experience with grief, also juxtaposed with like my experiences with religion. So it's kind of just a clusterfuck, right? For 16-year-old me, I'm not having a great time. And like
Mhm.
2 years in, I was like, I should be over this. I'm so annoyed that I'm like still grieving. And my therapist so tenderly and so directly looked at me and was like, I believe that we're all grieving all the time. We're grieving big things, we're grieving small things, we're grieving change, we're grieving loss. And using that framework, I think, can help normalize your internal experience of why am I feeling so disappointed? Why am I feeling X, Y, and Z, right?
Mhm.
And using the framework of grief can be a game changer for that because, oh, maybe what I'm experiencing is like little bursts of grief, right? And that is a framework that I use with clients all the time. That is a framework that I use in my own life all the time. It has changed how I view the world and my like relationships, and it's been incredibly helpful for my clients who have experienced harmful religious experiences because it's like, yeah, you got activated and your grief is getting activated too, or you realized, oh yeah, you got engaged, and even though it's been 10 years since you left the church, these people who were really important to you are not going to be at your wedding. Of course you're
Mhm.
experiencing grief, right? Um and so I like to share that because it changed the way I view life. It was so helpful.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really
Shout out
pretty.
Kim. She was great.
Yeah, go off, Kim, diva. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your time and chit
Yeah.
chatting. And thank you for the work that you do. I think it's super important. I yeah, thanks for coming on. I totally appreciate it. And it's so nice to talk to a fellow Georgian.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I am so grateful to be here.
I love it. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thanks.